ready to rant.
Welcome back to the Read It Rant podcast, where we read it, review it, and when a book leaves enough of an impression, good or bad, or somewhere in that beautifully frustrating middle, we bring it back from the bookshelf and give it another shot under the spotlight. Alright? I'm your host, Tony. This is the Rant Revival, and we're not reviewing a shiny new book sitting on everybody's speed. We're actually going backward. We're going to reopen the case. We're going to revisit books I've already encountered and asking one simple question. Does my original opinion still hold up? And tonight, we're going sailing. Unfortunately, because we're going to revive R.J. Barker's The Bone Ships. Now, if you followed this podcast for a while, you already know there is some history between me and this book, because The Bone Ships didn't just challenge me, I DNF'd it. Like, hard DNF. And tonight, we're going to figure out whether the Bone Ships deserve to be abandoned at sea, or whether I owe this book another voyage. Alright? But first, I want to establish what is The Bone Ships. It was published by Orbit in 2019. It's the first novel in R.J. Barker's The Tide Child trilogy, and conceptually, I have to give Barker credit. This is not your standard medieval, European fantasy world with castle knights, taverns, and somebody discovering they're secretly the heir to something. We're thrown into an ocean-dominated world where ships are constructed using the bones of enormous sea dragons known as Kishan. Those creatures have largely disappeared. Their bones are precious, and the societies inhabiting this world have built cultures, warfare, and power structures around the sea. At the center of the story is Joran Twiner, a disgraced shipwife aboard the Tide Child, a black ship crewed largely by people who have been condemned. And some context here, a shipwife is the verbose terminology, one of the verbose terms that R.J. Barker uses, means freaking captain. That whole thing drove me nuts. However, we have Lucky Mies, Gilbrand, she enters the picture, and suddenly Joran isn't exactly running the ship anymore. What follows is a maritime fantasy involving wars, survival, politics, enormous creatures, and a mission that could potentially change the balance of power. On paper, Tony should absolutely adore and love this book. It's a huge fantasy world with massive creatures, naval warfare, strange cultures, original world building, danger, political conflict. I should have ate this up. There's just one freaking huge problem. I have to understand what the hell I'm reading, okay? And this was my original rant. Because here's where the Bone Ships originally lost me. The verbose terminology. Barker throws you into this world and essentially says swim. There is specialized language everywhere. From ship terminology to ranks, world-specific terminology, cultural terminology, creatures, weapons, locations, and social structures. And instead of stopping every 5 seconds to explain everything directly to you, Barker expects you to learn through context. However, the context is not your normal context clues. He takes contextualization and puts verbosity into it, and it drove me nuts. I mean, for some fantasy readers, that's heaven. They want to be thrown into an unfamiliar civilization and slowly piece everything together. Like I said before, there's a difference between mystery and confusion. Mystery creates curiosity. Confusion makes me DNF the damn thing. However, I don't need an author holding my hand. I don't need 3 paragraphs explaining every sword somebody picks up. But I do need enough contextual breadcrumbs to understand the basic mechanics of the world I'm standing in. And the Bone Ships made me feel like somebody dropped me onto a warship halfway across an ocean, handed me a job I wasn't qualified for, and then started yelling nautical terminology at me. Like, sir, I don't know where the hell the damn bathroom is. Like, come on, dude. And then, here's where the revival really gets interesting, though, Because time away from a book can really change your perspective. And I'm going to be honest, over the past couple of weeks, I've been looking at the Bone Ships on my shelf, and there's something I appreciate more now. R.J. Barker really committed to his world, He didn't build generic fantasy with nautical decorations. This world feels like it developed independently. Its language reflected its culture, its hierarchy reflects its history. Its ships aren't simply pirate ships with fantasy names slapped onto them. There is an entire civilization behind this concept, and that is impressive. Actually, it's something I frequently ask fantasy authors to do, make your world feel like your world. And Barker absolutely does that. So I've got to acknowledge the irony here, and one of the things that did frustrate me most about the Bone Ships is also evidence of how deeply Barker constructed the world. And this is where the Rant Revival really gets complicated, because now I'm asking, was Barker bad at explaining his world, or was I expecting the book to explain a world that Barker deliberately wanted me to experience? For me, that's not the same criticism. And this is probably the strongest argument for reviving this book. The world is very weird, And I mean that as a compliment, especially because the plot doesn't show up even 234 pages into the book. Fantasy desperately needs weird. Like, give me civilizations that don't feel like somebody copied medieval England and changed 3 names and added dragons. Barker gives us an original idea with an ocean civilization shaped by enormous sea creatures. He gives us ships constructed from dragon bones. He gives us a society where maritime power isn't background decoration. It's foundational. You know, there's religion, hierarchy, warfare, punishment, and survival are all intertwined with the sea. That is legitimate world building. The problem is its accessibility. There's a learning curve here and a big learning curve. And the Bone Ships does not seem particularly interested in flattening that curve for you. You either climb it or you fall off the damn side. I fell off the damn side. Then we have Joran Twiner. And this is another reason I think the book deserves reconsideration. Joran isn't introduced as some unstoppable fantasy badass. He's damaged, he's a drunk, he's disgraced. His authority isn't exactly inspiring confidence. And then Lucky Mies arrives out of nowhere and completely disrupts his position and takes it from him. And then he's like her second in command. Like, that's an interesting foundation for character development because Joran has somewhere to go. He's not starting at level 99. He's starting from failure and being a drunk. And stories about rebuilding a person can be incredibly compelling. The question is whether you're willing to stay aboard long enough to really watch that transformation happen. My original answer was nope. But looking back, that's probably the character element I'm most curious about revisiting. But then there's Lucky Mies. Now we're talking because she immediately changes that energy. Like, she's commanding, mysterious, and inexperienced. And her presence does create tension because Joran's authority doesn't simply disappear emotionally just because somebody more capable walks onto the ship. Their dynamic gives the story something it desperately needed for me, which is a human anchor. And once characters begin interacting and conflicting with one another, the terminology becomes easier to tolerate because now there's an emotional reason to continue. And that's something I didn't appreciate enough the first time. So, I sit here for the last couple of weeks and I ask myself, so was the DNF fair? And I gotta say yes and no. Alright? Because I'm not gonna rewrite history and pretend I still love something that frustrated me. At the time I read The Bone Ships, the barrier between me and the story was too high. Reading started feeling like homework, and I have one very simple philosophy. Reading is supposed to make me want to keep reading. And if I'm constantly stopping because I don't understand terminology, geography, hierarchy, or what somebody else is talking about, eventually immersion breaks. And once immersion breaks for me repeatedly, I'm probably going to put the book down. So yeah, the DNF was fair for me at the moment. But here's what has changed. Time has passed, I've read more fantasy, I've encountered more authors who use immersion-heavy world-building. I've gotten better at recognizing when an author isn't refusing to explain something, but instead intends for the explanation to emerge naturally. And that's why The Bone Ships is getting revived. However, this is very worth noting, I'm not suddenly giving The Bone Ships 5 stars. I'm not pretending the terminology stopped bothering me. And I'm definitely not saying every reader should push through a book they're not enjoying because someone on the internet promises it gets good 300 pages later. No. Your reading time belongs to you. But The Bone Ships is something that a lot of easier fantasy novels don't. Identity. I remember this world. I remember the Bone Ships. I remember Joran, Lucky Mies, and most importantly, I remember why I was frustrated. I think as a reader that's really significant because forgettable books don't make it on to Rant Revival. Books that leave something behind do. And The Bone Ships left something behind. So tonight's official Rant Revival verdict is the DNF stands, but the case is reopened. I think The Bone Ships deserve another chance, not because my original criticism was wrong, but because I may be the right reader for what Barker was trying to do. And if I pick this thing back up, which I think I probably am, because for me, I can't leave a book unread on my shelf, it drives me crazy, and Barker does start throwing 17 unexplained nautical terms at me again, buddy, you and I are going to have another conversation. I really hope it picks up after 240 pages, because I'm 235, and I've heard it gets better as the story goes on towards the end of the book, so I may have to power through it to get to the second and third book, because I bought them, and I also bought his other work. That is tonight's Rant Revival and R.J. Barker's The Bone Ships. If you read it, I want to know, did the terminology and world building overwhelm you at first? Did you push through? Did it eventually click? Or did you jump ship and abandon ship right alongside me? Drop your verdict in the comments. And if you're new here, okay, welcome to the Read Rant podcast, where books don't disappear just because the review is over. Sometimes we bring them back, sometimes we change our minds, sometimes we double down, and sometimes we discover that the right book can show up at the wrong time. Alright? I'm your host, Tony. keep reading, keep reviewing, and most importantly, embrace the rant. Read it and rant is out.